Hello everyone, it's Candace from Beacon Hill Books. I'm here today with my best books of 2017. This is an exciting video, but very hard, and I had a really hard time culling down the number to a more manageable number. These are all books that I've read in 2017, although a lot of them are actually have been released in 2017. I'm not going to go in any particular order. I was just unable to prioritize them. You know, it's funny, I was looking back at all the books that I read, and it's a lot of these books, some I have rated 5 stars, and I'm not even going to talk about them today. I really wanted to think about what books have stayed with me the longest and had an impact, and a lot of those can have hard subjects, and it made me think about how I'm rating my books in general. I gave about, according to Goodreads, 20 5-star books this year. According to my spreadsheet, which allows for 4.5 and below, I gave 17. So I do like the half stars better, but I think for talking purposes, so speaking to you guys, it's better just to have stars. But I realized that a lot of my 5 stars have to do with my emotional response to it. And so, you know, maybe a book isn't the best written, or maybe it's a very hard subject and I gave it 5 stars, but I don't consider it like a favorite of mine this year. I'm glad I read it, but it's not one that I would say is my favorite. One book that had really great staying power was Child of the Dark, The Diary of Carolina Maria de Jesus, by Carolina Maria de Jesus. I've talked about this book multiple times. It's sort of a memoir / diary that Carolina writes, living in the slums of Brazil, and it's just a little short book. It was published in 1960, and her life, I just still can't comprehend. It brought a lot of light into the slums and the poverty that people were living in Brazil. And I'm not sure. I haven't looked. It might be still to this day. And then also after finishing the book and Googling what happened to Carolina, I just can't get her out of my brain. She was a woman of considerable strength and wanting, I think a lot of these books that I have a common theme of wanting to better themselves, rise above and educate themselves, do something that wasn't very common at the time, especially for women. So I highly recommend Child of the Dark, the struggle that she had to go through in a daily life to just live her own life, feed herself and feed her 3 children, let alone survive in the squalor and neighborhoods of the people around her. The next book I want to talk about, and it doesn't need to be long because there's nothing that has to be said further about this book, is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. One of the reasons I started BookTube was to hold myself to reading a classic a month, and I think this was my favorite of the ones I read this year. For such a short book, Bradbury sure packs a punch. It was released in 1953, and as classics tend to do, it stands the test of time. It's pertinent to today's situation. I really loved it. I can't wait to read more of Bradbury's, and as a book person especially, I don't see how you can't not love this book. The next book I'm going to talk about is a BookTube favorite, and I think it was so impactful to me because this year we've had so much going on with North Korea, but I really didn't get in depth into the discussions of what was happening. And in this book, In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park, it just has stuck with me. Again, it's someone going through a very difficult time, and it has since made me want to read more and learn more about what's happening there. But Yeonmi Park's story, it's just unbelievable. It's an unbelievable thing that people have to go through these types of issues given its current day. I did do a video on this, so I'll post that. Most people probably have read the book or have heard about this book, so I don't need to go into it very far. The next book I read was one of the first I read in this year, and it was The Confessions of Young Nero by Margaret George. Now, you guys know, especially if you watch my channel in the beginning of the year, how much I love Margaret George. She's really the author that got me into historical fiction, and I hadn't learned anything before about Nero. I definitely need to brush up on some more of my Roman history, which is, I have since gotten multiple books to read. But I just really, really enjoy how George tells the story about Nero. He is a sort of unreliable narrator, and I learned so much. I enjoyed the stories, entertaining, and I cannot believe that I have to wait. Actually, the first time I think that she's written 2 books instead of 1. Her books can be quite lengthy. I don't know how many pages this book was off the top of my head, but I'm so much looking forward to the second book when she releases it. I don't think there's any information about when that will be. The next book I really, really enjoyed was The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane by Lisa C. That was also released this year. This book, I read a lot of books about immigrants and identity this year, and this book for some reason has risen to the top for me. I think because it touches on so many aspects of qualities that are important to me and subjects that are interesting to me. I have made a full review of this book, so I'll post it here if you want to learn more. But briefly, it's just about a girl that lives in this remote village in China. She accidentally gets pregnant and has to figure out what to do with her daughter. And this was back in the time when China only really allowed for the one-child rule. So most people, should be married, and they also preferred to have males instead. And I really like Lisa C. in general, but I think this might be one of my favorite books that she's written. Next book will not be a surprise to anybody that's watched my channel at all this year. It was The Peabody Sisters by Megan Marshall. I've talked about this book ad nauseum. This was just a book I found at the Little Free Library by my house, same as Child of the Dark. So Little Free Library, random books, and 2 of my favorites this year. So shout out to my neighbors. I can't get over this book. I never would think that this type of book would capture my attention so much, because maybe if I saw The Peabody Sisters, but then the subtitle 3 Women Who Ignited American Romanticism, it almost seems kind of textbooky, but it doesn't read that way. Megan Marshall did a spectacular job of writing about the 3 Peabody sisters, that is Elizabeth, Mary, and Sophia, and their love interests, but also primarily about Elizabeth and her quest for bettering herself and others in terms of education. And I think a big reason why this hit home for me so much was it takes place in Boston and around a lot of the sites that I'm, down the road. They actually lived at one point. So it seems really real, and close. A couple of people go to Concord or downtown Boston or in Back Bay. Megan Marshall spent a huge amount of time researching this book, and I can tell. And I really want to prioritize reading another of Megan Marshall's books next year. She does a great job, and she has a few books out now. I think one on Elizabeth Bishop and one on Margaret Fuller. If history, if women in history and women in regards to education and furthering themselves interests you, I don't think you can miss this book. The next book I'm going to talk about is really a bunch of books, because one of my goals this year was to try and finish all of Robin Hobb's books, her main books. And of the 7 books that I read of Robin Hobb's, which I'm quite happy with because they're very large. And sometimes I did have a little bit of trouble gaining momentum with them. So I started giving myself a little bit of a break. But I read 7 of them. And of the 7, I gave 3 5-stars. And that was Fool's Fate, which is Tiny Man number 3, Assassin's Fate, which fits in the Fool number 3, and Ship of Magic, which I believe is the first one in the Live Ship Traders trilogy. I just have the Rainwild Chronicles to read because I read them out of order. But Robin Hobb is one of my favorite authors. I just love her writing, her world, her characters. And in some ways, I'm kind of glad I still have some books left because I'm just not ready to be done with her. I just completely cheated, and I could lump all of her books really into some of my favorites this year because I just love her writing. The next book I'm going to say is a nonfiction book. It is Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin, and this was released in 2006. I buddy read this with Liz over at Book Learning. And I do think in terms of buddy reading, it can sometimes interrupt your reading plans that you might have for the month. But what I found is that every buddy read that I've had, I just seem to retain the book and the experience so much better. And I think that was really important in this book because there is so much in this book, and it just has solidified Abraham Lincoln as one of my favorite historical figures. I would not think that I would really enjoy learning about other people in Lincoln's cabinet, but Kearns, she just made that enjoyable and made them real people, not like characters in a history book you read from school. And even though I read this book, which I think is like 900 pages, I still am intrigued enough that I want to read more about Abraham Lincoln. So I think if you are interested in politics, history, presidents, I just think this is a book that is a must read. It is a large book, so like I said, if you could find someone buddy read with you, I think it helps. It helps you get through it. We just read a chapter a night, and I'm just so glad. I think this coming year I want to do something else, another larger book about a president because of this. The next book I'm going to talk about is Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. This was released in 2017, and I just can't get this book out of my head. I have learned so much about the historical aspects of Japan and Japanese people living in Korea and how they're treated. And that historical part of it always will resonate very well with me. But the story of the characters is what sticks. And Min-Jin Lee just like takes your emotions and goes like this with it. It's like you're on a roller coaster, and I just think it's a really, really well-written book with so many good aspects about it. I think anyone would enjoy this book, but particularly if you like historical fiction or any sort of cultural fiction type books, I think this is something that can't be missed. One of my most favorite books on this list was Margaret the First by Danielle Dutton, and that was released in 2016. This book I still think about. I just think I love books that have whimsy in it, and the way that Dutton writes, it's whimsical and it's based on history, and she totally takes what she thinks Margaret the First or Margaret Cavendish was thinking. And she was such a tremendous character. This is another female that is just trying to better herself, improve situations, stand out from the rest, be able to be a writer in a time where females weren't really writers. And I was like, I want to hang out with this girl. Like, she's just so cool. And yet she was so lonely and going through such hard times. And for such a short book, I fell in love with her, and I fell in love with Dutton's writing. And I have to read some more. I think she has one other book. I'm definitely going to read this book again, and I'm not much of a rereader. I just cannot say enough about Margaret the First. I think that book, in terms of fiction, was my favorite this year. Another book that was released this year that I really enjoyed was Sourdough by Robin Sloan. This book is not rated as highly on Goodreads as the other books I'm talking about, but this is a book that I enjoyed partly because of the story and how it was told, partly because it was just a short little entertaining romp into technology and cooking. It is similar to Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore in the fact that it deals with technology. So part of the book is told through emails, part of the book is told through Lois, who is the main character's perspective. And she is trying to change her life by creating sourdough bread, but in a techno fashion. I don't know. This touches the little nerd in me, I think. I don't know that everyone's going to love it as much as I did, but for like a little fluffy, entertaining read, when I look back at all the books I read, this one just sits up there at the top. And then my final book, which I want to actually be 2 books, but it's by the same author, was The Bear and the Nightingale and The Girl in the Tower by Catherine Arden. I finished these books right at the end of December. What a treat. I was not expecting what I received at the end of the year. These books scratched a folklore itch in me that I didn't know I had. And I think learning about Russia in slightly historical times, not that that's a main component of it. The main component of the book that appeals to me is the whimsy in it. Again, it's the characters, the sort of gods or chemovoi. They are, I almost want to say, pagan-like gods that exist in certain areas in Russia. So like in your bathhouse or in the barn or in the woods. And this really amazing character in Vasya who isn't willing to settle to be just a woman that's married off. She has a free spirit that she wants to go on adventures and be able to ride this fantastical horse bareback. And I have fallen in love with Catherine Arden as a writer as well. She's one of my new favorite authors, and I cannot wait for her 3rd trilogy to come out. So there you have it. This was a great year for me, and it was really, really difficult for me to pick out my favorite books. But looking back, I feel like those are the ones that meant the most to me. Let me know if you feel the same about any of these books or what your favorite book was, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.